Steve manages boxes. We shape future leaders. The words hit me like a physical blow, right there in the middle of the elegant ballroom. My wife's voice carried just enough for the surrounding guests to hear, clear, dismissive, and dripping with condescension. I froze, champagne flute halfway to my lips, as several heads turned our way. A few awkward chuckles rippled through the small circle that had formed around us. Helen didn't even look at me. Instead, she placed her hand on the sleeve of Marcus Emerson, the CEO of Nexus Technologies and father to one of her precious students, and smiled with practiced charm. Education is where the real impact happens, wouldn't you agree? I stood there, 43 years old, regional director of logistics for one of the largest distribution networks in the country, suddenly reduced to a box manager by my wife of 15 years. That moment, right there, was when I knew our marriage was over. But let me back up. You need the full picture to understand how we got here and what happened next. Because what followed wasn't just a divorce, it was a war, one that would reveal exactly who Helen and I really were when everything was on the line. The Hillcrest Academy Annual Benefactors Gala is this Friday, Helen announced 3 days earlier, not looking up from her laptop at our kitchen island. I need you there by 7 sharp. Please wear the charcoal Tom Ford, not the Navy Brooks Brothers. The Whitmores commented last year that it looked mass-produced. I looked up from the logistics report I'd been reviewing. The quarterly efficiency numbers had improved by 16% across the Eastern Seaboard distribution centers, something I'd been working toward for nearly a net months. I was about to share the news when I registered what she'd said. This Friday? Helen, I can't do Friday. I have the quarterly operations review with the executive team. I told you about this 3 weeks ago. She finally glanced up, her eyes narrowing slightly. This isn't optional, Steve. The board chairman will be there along with every major donor. The Emersons confirmed yesterday. Do you have any idea how much their annual contribution means to our expansion plans? And do you have any idea what this review means for my division? For the 342 people whose livelihoods depend on our performance and metrics? I set my tablet down with more force than intended. I've been preparing for this presentation for months. Helen's sigh was theatrical. Can't you just reschedule or have one of your assistants handle it? One of my assistants. I repeated the words slowly. You want me to hand off the executive quarterly review, the one that determines our annual bonus structure and next year's operational budget, to one of my assistants? Well, when you put it like that, she said, the irritation clear in her voice. But this gala is crucial, Steve. It's not just some corporate dinner with people discussing shipping routes or whatever it is you talk about. I sat back, suddenly seeing our kitchen, our relationship, as if from a distance. The sleek granite countertops she'd insisted on during our remodel last year. The Sub-Zero refrigerator that cost more than my first car. The custom cabinetry that had to be flown in from Italy because American craftsmanship simply wouldn't do. All paid for with my box managing salary. I'll move some things around, I said finally, already mentally calculating how I could compress 8 hours of review into 4, fly across 3 states, and still make it to her precious gala. It would be brutal, but doable. It was always doable somehow. I'll be there. Her smile returned, satisfied. Perfect. Oh, and the Morgans might be bringing their nephew, the one who just made partner at Goldman. I mentioned you could talk to him about internship opportunities for Zach. Our son, Zachary, was a junior in high school. Bright, quiet, more interested in computer science than finance. He'd never once mentioned wanting to work on Wall Street. Zach wants to code, Helen. He's been talking about Caltech since freshman year. She waved a dismissive hand. He's 16. He has no idea what he wants. Trust me, a summer at Goldman would change his perspective entirely. I see it with my students all the time. Proper exposure is everything. I didn't argue. There was no point. In Helen's carefully constructed worldview, certain paths were inherently superior. Finance, law, medicine, if you must. The technical work that actually kept the world functioning, that was for other people's children. I returned to my report, the satisfaction of our regional improvements now tainted. Just another day of managing boxes in Helen's eyes. Our relationship hadn't always been this way. When we met 17 years ago, Helen had been a passionate young teacher at a public high school in Boston, full of idealistic plans to change education from within. I was a recently promoted logistics manager, excited about implementing new inventory systems that could revolutionize efficiency. We were equals then, two young professionals with ambition and purpose. We'd stay up late in her tiny apartment, drinking cheap wine and talking for hours about our dreams. She'd listen, genuinely interested, as I explained how the right logistics systems could reduce waste, increase access to resources, and literally change communities. I'd watch her eyes light up as she described reaching students others had given up on. We married within a year, bought our first small house in the suburbs, had Zachary, and 2 years later, our daughter Lily. Life was hectic but harmonious. The shift happened gradually. Helen moved from public education to a small private academy, then to Hillcrest, one of the most exclusive K-12 institutions in the state. Her salary never approached mine, but her social connections exploded. Suddenly, our weekends were filled with gallery openings, charity lunches, and dinner parties with parents who casually mentioned their Hampton houses or Swiss ski trips. At first, I was happy for her. Helen had always been brilliant, driven, and charismatic. She deserved recognition. But somewhere along the way, her ambition morphed into something harder, more brittle. The passionate educator became a polished administrator, more concerned with endowments and board politics than classroom innovations. And I, despite my own professional advancement, somehow became increasingly irrelevant in her narrative. The day of the gala arrived. I'd been up since 4:30 a.m., finalized my presentation by 6, and was on a 7:15 flight to Chicago. The executive review went well, despite the compressed schedule. We secured the budget increase for the East Coast automation project I'd been championing, and the CFO specifically commended our team's efficiency improvements. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was racing through O'Hare, changing into my formal wear in an airport bathroom, and catching the last flight that would get me to the gala just 30 minutes late. I texted Helen, "Landing in 20. We'll be there by 7:30. No response. The Uber dropped me at the Atherton Hotel downtown at 7:28. I straightened my tie, checked my reflection in the glass doors, and hurried into the ballroom. The space was transformed with tasteful lighting, flower arrangements that probably cost more than my first car, and about 200 of the wealthiest, most influential people in our region. I spotted Helen immediately. She was radiant in a midnight blue gown, her dark hair swept up elegantly, standing with a small group near the center of the room. I recognized Marcus Emerson, the tech CEO whose company had recently gone public to the tune of several $billions, his wife Charlotte, the board chairman and his husband, and another couple I didn't know. I made my way toward them, snagging a champagne flute from a passing server. Helen saw me approaching but didn't pause in whatever she was saying. Her eyes flicked over me briefly, registering my presence without acknowledgement, then returned to Marcus. "Which is why our STEM initiative is so crucial," she was saying as I reached the circle. "These children will be inheriting a world transformed by technology. We're not just teaching them facts. We're cultivating a mindset of innovation." "Helen," I said, sliding next to her, "sorry I'm a bit late." She turned, her smile professional but cool. "Steve, glad you could join us." No explanation for my absence, no introduction to the group. She immediately turned back to the conversation. "Marcus was just sharing fascinating insights about the future tech landscape," she continued. "The implications for education are profound." I extended my hand to Marcus. "Steve Brennan, I don't think we formally met, though I've heard great things about your contributions to Hillcrest." His handshake was firm. "Marcus Emerson, Helen speaks highly of your support for the school." "My support," I repeated, catching the specific phrasing. "Not my partnership, not our shared commitment. My support, as if I were a silent donor rather than her husband." "What is it you do, Steve?" asked the woman I didn't recognize. Before I could answer, Helen interjected, "Steve manages logistics for a distribution company." Her tone was pleasant but carried that slight edge I'd come to recognize, the one that subtly communicated, "This isn't important." "Regional director, actually," I corrected, keeping my voice light. "I oversee supply chain operations across 7 states. Fascinating, Marcus said, seeming genuinely interested. The logistics sector has been undergoing massive disruption. How are you handling the AI integration challenges? We've been investing heavily in that space. It was a good question, one I could have discussed for hours. We'd been pioneering a new predictive stocking system that was showing remarkable results. But before I could formulate my response, Helen laughed lightly and placed her hand on Marcus's arm. Steve manages boxes. We shape future leaders. She gestured elegantly toward their little circle. Your daughter, Emma, is absolutely thriving in our advanced physics program, by the way. Dr. Reynolds tells me she has real potential for MIT. And there it was, the moment, the words that would end our marriage. Marcus looked briefly uncomfortable, glancing between us. The others shifted slightly, sensing the sudden tension. I felt a hot flush of anger and humiliation rise from my collar. Excuse me, I said, setting down my barely touched champagne. I need some air. I walked away before anyone could respond, maintaining my composure through sheer force of will. I made it to the hotel lobby, then outside to the cool night air, before my hands started shaking. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, countless sacrifices and compromises, all reduced to Steve manages boxes. I loosened my tie and took several deep breaths. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Helen, where did you go? The Fosters just arrived and want to discuss the summer sailing program with us. No acknowledgement of what had happened, no apology, just another social obligation I was now failing to fulfill. I texted back, I'm going home. Enjoy shaping future leaders. Then I turned off my phone, hailed a cab, and left. Helen didn't return until after midnight. I was sitting in the dark of our living room, a glass of scotch in hand. I'd spent the hours thinking, really thinking, about our relationship, our patterns, our future, and I'd reached clarity. She flipped on the lights, startled to find me there. What are you doing sitting in the dark? She demanded, dropping her clutch on the console table. And why did you leave like that? I had to make excuses for you all night. What excuses did you make? I asked calmly. Did you tell them I had an emergency shipment of boxes to manage? Her eyes narrowed. You're being ridiculous. It was a figure of speech. No, Helen, it wasn't. It was a deliberate dismissal of me, of my work, my contribution, my value in front of people you wanted to impress. You're overreacting. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing to me. I set my glass down. When was the last time you asked about my work? Not just the superficial, how was your day, but actually showed interest in what I do, in what matters to me. She sighed dramatically. I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt, but you have to understand the context. These people, I interrupted, don't pay our mortgage. They don't fund the kids' college accounts. They don't keep the lights on. I do that, Helen, with my apparently meaningless career moving boxes around. That's not fair. My work contributes. Your work, I said, rising to face her, pays less than a third of what mine does. And that's fine. I've never once complained about being the primary earner. What I can't accept is being treated like I'm somehow less than you because of it. Her face hardened. So this is about money? How typically male. No, this is about respect. Basic human respect. I took a deep breath. I think we should separate. The words hung in the air between us. Helen's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. You can't be serious. Over one comment at a party? It's not one comment. It's a pattern. Years of subtle digs, dismissive remarks, and clear embarrassment about who I am and what I do. Tonight was just the final straw. She stared at me, speechless for once. Then, what about the children? The children, I said quietly, deserve to see their father treated with dignity. What kind of example are we setting for Zach and Lily if they grow up watching you treat me like I'm beneath you? You're being dramatic. We can discuss this tomorrow when you're not emotional. I shook my head. I'm not being emotional. For the first time in years, I'm seeing things with perfect clarity. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. We can talk logistics tomorrow. Logistics, she repeated with a bitter laugh. How appropriate. I left her standing there and walked upstairs, oddly calm despite the seismic shift I'd just initiated. I was done being the less important partner in our marriage, done apologizing for a career that supported our family, and that, despite Helen's dismissal, made a real difference in the world. What I didn't know then was that I just stepped into a battle that would test everything about me, as a professional, as a father, and as a man. The next few weeks were a blur of tense conversations, tearful children, and practical arrangements. I moved into a furnished apartment nearby, close enough to maintain my relationship with Zach and Lily, but far enough to give Helen and me necessary space. At first, we tried to keep things amicable. We agreed to tell the kids together, emphasizing that we both loved them and that this wasn't their fault. Zach, at 16, received the news with stoic silence. Lily, our 12-year-old, cried and asked 100 questions neither of us could really answer. "But why can't you just say sorry to each other?" she demanded, her face streaked with tears. "How do you explain to a child that some breaches can't be repaired with a simple apology? That sometimes respect, once lost, is nearly impossible to rebuild?" I told the children they could visit my apartment anytime, set up rooms for both of them, promised that nothing would change about how much I loved them or how involved I'd be in their lives. Helen was coldly practical during those initial discussions. We divided household responsibilities, created a temporary custody arrangement, and agreed to hold off on legal proceedings until we'd had time to adjust to the separation. That lasted exactly 17 days. On the 18th day, I received an email from Gerald Hoffman, apparently my wife's new attorney. The message was brief, professional, and devastating. "Mr. Brennan, I have been retained by Helen Brennan regarding your pending divorce. She has instructed me to pursue full physical custody of your minor children, with reasonable visitation rights granted to you." I didn't finish reading, couldn't process the words through the sudden roaring in my ears. Full custody? After we'd explicitly agreed to a 50-50 arrangement? I called Helen immediately. "What is this?" I demanded when she answered. "I assume you've heard from Gerald," she replied, her voice maddeningly calm. "We had an agreement, Helen. That was before I had time to really consider what's best for the children. And you've decided that barely seeing their father is what's best for them?" The hurt and anger in my voice was palpable. "Don't be dramatic, Steve. You'd still see them. But let's be realistic. Your work schedule has never been compatible with primary caregiving. You're constantly traveling, working late, dealing with your logistics issues. My logistics issues pay for their private school tuition, their music lessons, their summer camps, and I have never, not once, missed an important event in their lives because of work." "That's not how I remember it," she said coolly. "But we can let the court decide what arrangement is most suitable." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Then I called the most ruthless divorce attorney I could find. Margaret Chen's office was nothing like I expected. Instead of the opulent leather and mahogany stereotype, it was modern, minimalist, and oddly calming. The woman herself matched the space, precise, direct, and radiating quiet competence. "So," she said after I'd explained the situation, "your wife blindsided you with a custody battle." "Yes. And you believe she's doing this why? Leverage for financial concessions? Genuine concern about your parenting? Personal vindictiveness?" I considered the question carefully. "All of the above, probably. But mostly I think it's about control. Helen likes having the upper hand." Margaret nodded. "And what's your priority here, Mr. Brennan? What outcome are you seeking?" "Equal time with my children. I won't accept being reduced to a weekend father who gets to take them to dinner and movies, while Helen makes all the real decisions about their lives." She studied me for a moment. "That won't be easy. Courts still tend to favor mothers in custody disputes, especially with a daughter as young as yours. And if your wife can make a convincing case that your work obligations prevent consistent parenting time." "But that's not true," I insisted. "I've always been involved. Always. Ask my kids. Ask their teachers, their doctors, their coaches." "We will," Margaret assured me, "but we need more than testimonials. We need evidence, documented, incontrovertible evidence of your involvement in their daily lives." I thought about this. "What kind of evidence?" "Everything. Calendar entries showing you attended school events, email exchanges with teachers, medical records indicating your presence at appointments, photos of you at their activities, text messages about homework, friend issues, daily logistics, The more comprehensive, the better. A slow realization dawned on me. I think I can do better than that. Margaret raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I'm a logistics director. Planning, documentation, and record keeping are literally my profession. I leaned forward. For the past 3 years, I've kept detailed records of every aspect of our family life as part of a personal organization system. Now I had her full attention. What kind of records? Digital calendars with every appointment, event, and activity. Spreadsheets tracking household expenses, chore completion, and childcare arrangements. Archives of every school communication. Photo albums organized by date and event. I even have a log of which parent handled which bedtime routine each night because we used to alternate reading with each child. A slow smile spread across Margaret's face. Mr. Brennan, I think you might be my favorite client ever. She paused, tapping her pen thoughtfully against her notepad. But I need to ask, why did you keep such meticulous records of family life? Most people don't document their parenting with spreadsheets. It was a fair question. It started as a work habit that spilled over. In logistics, if you don't track it, you can't improve it. I wanted to be certain I was being the best father I could be, despite my professional demands. So I tracked everything. How many hours I spent with each child, what activities we did together, who handled which responsibilities. And your wife never found this unusual? Helen doesn't concern herself with how I organize my time as long as I meet her expectations. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. She assumed I was working when I was updating my systems. To be honest, I don't think she ever asked. Margaret nodded, something like respect flickering in her eyes. Well, her loss is definitely your gain in this situation. Let's get these records organized for court. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Helen's attorney, a silver-haired man with a reputation for representing the wealthy spouses of the city's elite, painted me as a workaholic father too busy with shipping concerns to be present for his children. Mr. Brennan's demanding career requires frequent travel and irregular hours, he argued, during one particularly tense hearing. While admirable in a professional context, this schedule is simply incompatible with the stability children need from a primary caregiver. Helen testified about nights I'd missed dinner due to late meetings, school events I'd allegedly arrived late to, the time Lily had a minor bike accident and reached out to her mother first. Steve is a good father when he has time, she said, her voice carefully modulated to convey reluctant honesty rather than malice. But his priority has always been his career. The children understand that daddy's work comes first. That hurt, not just because it was untrue, but because it revealed how Helen truly saw me, as a provider first, parent second. During one particularly difficult day in court, Zach was called to testify. Helen's attorney clearly expected our son to confirm his mother's portrayal of me as the perpetually absent father. Instead, Zach spoke quietly but firmly about our Sunday morning coding sessions, the career day when I'd surprised him by arranging for his class to tour our main distribution center's robotics system, and how I'd adjusted my travel schedule to make every one of his debate team competitions. Dad works hard, he said, glancing briefly in my direction, but he's never made me feel like I'm less important than his job. He's just efficient with his time. Helen's face tightened at this unexpected testimony. During the recess that followed, she cornered me in the hallway outside the courtroom. What did you say to him? She hissed, her composure slipping. What did you promise him? I didn't say anything, Helen. That's the point you've been missing all along. I've been there. I've always been there. You just never bothered to notice. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. For once, we agree on something, I replied, watching her storm back to her attorney's side. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, followed Margaret's advice to appear reasonable, controlled, and focused on the children's well-being rather than my anger at Helen. When my turn came to present evidence, I was ready. Your Honor, Margaret began, rather than asking you to rely on contradicting testimonies about Mr. Brennan's involvement in his children's lives, we'd like to present factual documentation spanning the past 3 years. She proceeded to introduce what we'd come to call the logistics of fatherhood, my meticulously organized records of parental involvement. First came the calendar evidence, Color-coded entries showing exactly which parent attended which event. School conferences, dentist appointments, soccer games, piano recitals, theater productions, doctor visits. The pattern was unmistakable. My attendance record was actually better than Helen's, despite her claims. Next, the communication logs, thousands of emails and texts with teachers, coaches, and the children themselves. Me helping Zach work through a difficult coding problem while on a business trip. Late-night text exchanges with Lily about her anxiety before a big test. Regular check-ins during my travel days. Then, the photographic evidence. A digital timeline showing my consistent presence at milestone events in ordinary moments alike. Me teaching Zach to drive. Helping Lily with her science fair project. Family dinners. Weekend outings. Holiday celebrations. Finally, the activity logs. Detailed records of who had handled which parenting duty on which day, who helped with homework, who drove to activities, who attended parent meetings, who stayed home with sick children. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, paged through the evidence with increasing interest. "Mr. Brennan," she said finally, looking up at me, "this is rather comprehensive." "Yes, Your Honor, organization and documentation are central to my professional responsibilities. I applied the same diligence to tracking my family commitments." "Some might find this level of record-keeping unusual for family matters," she observed. "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but I found that in both business and personal life, good logistics prevent missed opportunities and ensure nothing important falls through the cracks. My children are the most important part of my life. Why wouldn't I apply my best skills to being there for them?" From the corner of my eye, I could see Helen's facade of calm confidence beginning to crack. She whispered urgently to her attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. The judge turned to Helen. "Mrs. Brennan, these records appear to contradict several key claims in your testimony. Would you care to address the discrepancies?" Helen straightened, summoning her administrator's poise. "Your Honor, anyone can keep a calendar. What matters is the quality of engagement, not just physical presence." "I agree," the judge replied, "which is why I find the content of these communications between Mr. Brennan and his children particularly relevant. These are not the cursory check-ins of a disengaged father." By the time we reached the end of that hearing, the momentum had shifted decisively. Helen's narrative, so compelling in its simple portrayal of the busy executive father versus the devoted educator mother, had crumbled against the weight of documented reality. The final custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early spring. By then, the emotional and financial toll of the proceedings had affected everyone. Zach had grown quieter, his grades slipping slightly for the first time. Lily had developed stomach aches before school. Helen looked perpetually tense, the strain showing in tight smiles and sharp responses. I wasn't faring much better. The combined pressure of maintaining my professional responsibilities while fighting for my children left little room for self-care. I'd lost weight, slept poorly, and found myself constantly toggling between focused determination and bone-deep exhaustion. That morning, I arrived at the courthouse early, sat alone in my car for 10 minutes, eyes closed, gathering my strength for what was to come. This was the end game. After today, we would have a resolution, for better or worse. As I walked toward the building, I spotted Helen arriving with her attorney. She saw me too, her steps faltering briefly before she continued with renewed purpose. We'd barely spoken directly in weeks, communicating almost exclusively through our lawyers. Inside, the tension was palpable as final arguments were presented. Gerald Hoffman made a last attempt to salvage Helen's position, emphasizing her role as an education professional, uniquely qualified to support the children's academic development. Margaret countered by highlighting my proven commitment to balanced parenting and stable presence despite professional demands. When the judge finally delivered her ruling, the relief nearly buckled my knees. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court awards joint legal custody to both parents, with primary physical placement with Mr. Brennan. Mrs. Brennan will have the children on alternating weekends and one overnight weekly, plus equal division of holidays and school breaks. Helen gasped audibly. Her attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm as the judge continued outlining the specifics of the arrangement. I remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might somehow alter this unexpected victory. This decision, the judge continued, looking directly at both of us, is based on documented patterns of involvement, stability of home environment, and the expressed preferences of the older child. The court finds Mr. Brennan has demonstrated exceptional commitment to maintaining consistent, engaged parenting despite professional obligations. She paused, then added, I would also note that Mrs. Brennan's apparent dismissal of her husband's professional contributions, while simultaneously depending on the financial benefits of that work, raises concerns about modeling respectful partnership for the children. Helen's face flushed crimson. I felt no triumph in her humiliation, only profound relief that my relationship with my children would remain intact. As we rose to leave, Helen approached me directly for the first time in months. Her voice was low, controlled, but vibrating with anger. Congratulations on your victory. I hope managing the children's lives proves as satisfying as managing your precious supply chains. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt an unexpected wave of sadness for what we'd become. They're not cargo, Helen. They're our children. And I'm not interested in victory. I just want to be their father. I would have happily shared that equally with you. Save the Nobility Act, she hissed. You wanted to punish me. No, I said quietly. I wanted to protect them and myself from someone who couldn't see value in anything that didn't enhance her status. You didn't lose because I outmaneuvered you. You lost because you couldn't imagine that moving boxes might require the same intelligence, dedication, and skill as molding young minds. She stared at me, speechless for once, then turned and walked away, shoulders rigid with dignity and defeat. The aftermath was both harder and easier than I expected. Harder because the children struggled with the transition despite my best efforts to make it seamless. Zach adapted more quickly, perhaps because at 16, he better understood the dynamics at play. Lily vacillated between clinging attachment and angry withdrawal, testing the boundaries of my commitment at every turn. One night, about 2 weeks after the custody ruling, I found Lily sitting on the floor of her new bedroom in my apartment, surrounded by her scattered belongings, sobbing quietly. Hey, sweetheart, I said softly, sitting down beside her. What's going on? She looked up, her face blotchy with tears. I hate this. I hate having 2 houses and 2 bedrooms and 2 of everything. I hate having to remember what stuff it is where and which parent I'm supposed to be with on which day. Her words pierced me. This was exactly what I tried to prevent, the fragmentation of her sense of security. I know it's hard, I told her, not trying to minimize her feelings. It's a big adjustment for all of us. Mom says it's your fault, she said, watching my reaction carefully. She says you chose your job over our family. I took a deep breath. Do you believe that? She shrugged, picking at the carpet. I don't know. You do work a lot. I do, I acknowledged, and I'm sorry if that ever made you feel less important. But Lily, I need you to know something. I waited until she looked up at me. There is nothing in my life, not my job, not anything, that matters more to me than you and Zach. Then why couldn't you and Mom just stay together? Her voice cracked. How do you explain adult relationship dynamics to a 12-year-old? How do you explain that sometimes love isn't enough when respect has eroded beyond repair? Sometimes, I said carefully, 2 people can both love their children very much, but still not be able to stay married to each other. Mom and I, we started seeing the world very differently, but that has nothing to do with how much we both love you. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm still mad at you, she said finally. That's okay, you're allowed to be mad. But I'm not going anywhere, Lily. No matter how mad you get, no matter how hard this is, I'm right here, and we'll figure it out together. She nodded slightly, then leaned against my shoulder, letting me put my arm around her. We sat like that for a long time, amidst the chaos of her half-unpacked life, saying nothing more. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning. The easiness came when, once the constant battle with Helen subsided, I found reserves of patience and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I adjusted my work schedule, delegated more effectively, and found a sustainable balance that allowed me to be fully present for my kids while maintaining my professional responsibilities. Helen, to her credit, eventually moved beyond her initial bitterness. 6 months after the custody ruling, we managed our first civil conversation about Zach's college applications. By the 1-year mark, we could attend school functions without palpable tension, though we carefully maintained our distance. The night that marked real change came unexpectedly. Lily's middle school was staging The Wizard of Oz, with our daughter playing Dorothy. Helen and I had arranged to sit separately, as had become our custom at school events. But as the lights dimmed and Lily appeared on stage, I glanced over to see Helen watching our daughter with naked pride and love. In that moment, I remembered what had drawn me to her all those years ago, her passion, her drive, her fierce devotion to her purpose. Those qualities hadn't vanished. They'd just been misdirected, warped by ambition and social climbing until they became unrecognizable. After the performance, we both waited in the school hallway to congratulate Lily. When she emerged, still in costume but with the ruby slippers in hand, her face lit up at seeing both parents together. "You were magnificent," Helen told her, enveloping her in a hug. "A star," I agreed, waiting my turn for an embrace. Lily looked between us, a cautious hope in her eyes. "Can we all go for ice cream, please? Like we used to?" Helen and I exchanged glances. I nodded slightly. She hesitated, then said, "I think that would be nice." At the ice cream parlor, sitting across from Helen with our children between us, I realized something important. We would never be what we once were to each other, but we could still be what our children needed us to be, parents who respected each other enough to set aside their own wounds. "How's the new logistics project going?" Helen asked during a lull in the conversation. "The one you mentioned was launching this quarter?" I paused, caught off guard by her apparent interest. "It's going well, actually. The predictive stocking system is showing even better results than projected." She nodded. "Zachary was explaining some of it to me. It sounds rather revolutionary if I understood correctly." Our son looked embarrassed but pleased. "Dad's team is basically teaching AI to predict inventory needs before they happen. It's pretty advanced stuff." I glanced at my son with surprise. He'd been listening to my work stories more carefully than I'd realized. "It is," Helen agreed, meeting my eyes briefly. "I should have paid more attention sooner." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, a small recognition of value where once there had been only dismissal. "Well," I said carefully, "we all have our blind spots." She almost smiled. "Indeed we do." 3 years have passed since that night at the Hillcrest Gala. 3 years since "Steve manages boxes" became the line that ended our marriage, but paradoxically began my reclamation of self-worth. I still run the regional logistics division, now with expanded responsibility for implementing our AI systems nationwide. Helen still directs Hillcrest Academy, though I hear she's instituted a new STEM initiative focusing on supply chain technology and sustainability. A small irony I appreciate, but never mention. The children divide their time between our homes, following the court-ordered schedule with increasingly flexible adjustments as they've grown older and their needs have changed. Zach is now in his sophomore year at, yes, Caltech, studying computer science with a focus on machine learning applications for infrastructure systems. Lily, at 15, shows signs of combining both our strengths, Helen's polished communication skills with my analytical precision. As for Helen and me, we've achieved something I wouldn't have thought possible in those dark days of legal battles and wounded pride. A functional co-parenting relationship based on mutual respect, if not affection. We'll never be friends exactly, but we've learned to recognize each other's value in our children's lives. Sometimes I think about Marcus Emerson and that fateful moment when Helen dismissed my career so casually. I heard his daughter ended up at Stanford, not MIT. Helen was disappointed but didn't say much about it to me. I did, however, receive an interesting call from Marcus himself about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. "Steve Brennan," he said when I answered. "Marcus Emerson?" "We met briefly at—" "I remember," I assured him, wondering why the tech CEO would be calling me directly. "Good. Listen, I've been following your company's work on predictive logistics systems. Fascinating application of machine learning principles. I'd like to discuss potential integration with some of Nexus's retail platforms. Would you be open to a meeting?" I was momentarily speechless, then, "I'd be interested in hearing more, certainly." Excellent. And Steve, for what it's worth, I've always thought logistics was where the real magic happens. Anyone can sell a product. Getting it exactly where it needs to be, exactly when it's needed, that's the art form most people never see. I smiled at the unexpected validation. I appreciate that perspective, Marcus. We ended up partnering on a pilot project that's now expanding nationwide. Turns out managing boxes was exactly the expertise his company needed. I never told Helen about that partnership, though I'm sure she eventually found out through her extensive social network. Some victories are sweeter when savored privately. And honestly, it wasn't about proving anything to her anymore. I had moved beyond needing her validation or approval. Last month, I was invited to give a guest lecture at Hillcrest Academy's New Business and Technology Symposium, an event Helen had spearheaded as part of her curriculum expansion. The invitation came from the department head, not from Helen, but I knew she must have approved it. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of bright young faces, including our daughter Lily in the front row, I felt an unexpected sense of completion. Not because I had won some imaginary contest with my ex-wife, but because I had stayed true to myself through the hardest battle of my life. Logistics isn't just about moving things from point A to point B, I told the students. It's about understanding the intricate connections that make our world function. It's about seeing patterns where others see chaos. And most importantly, it's about recognizing that every link in the chain has value, that the people loading the trucks matter just as much as the executives in the boardroom. I caught Helen's eyes as she stood at the back of the auditorium. She gave me a small nod. Not friendship, not love, but respect. Finally. Life has a way of coming full circle sometimes, not in perfect symmetry, but in meaningful connections you couldn't have anticipated. My marriage ended because Helen couldn't see value in what I contributed to the world. But that ending created space for others, including my children, to recognize that value more clearly. In logistics, we have a concept called optimal failure, when a system breaks down in exactly the right way to reveal critical improvements. My marriage was an optimal failure. Its collapse showed me exactly what needed to be rebuilt, not the relationship itself, but my willingness to stand firmly in my own worth. That night, walking out of the gala while Helen networked with her prestigious circles, I thought I was leaving everything behind. Instead, I was walking toward everything that mattered: my self-respect, my children's respect, and the knowledge that managing boxes might not shape future world leaders, but it had made me exactly the leader I needed to be.